So today we're going to talk about third-party rights, discharge, breach, and remedies. So if you've been following along, 2 chapters, chapter 8 and 9, on how contracts are formed, different things about contracts as they go on. Now we're at the other end a little bit when we talk about how they're discharged or how somebody breaches a contract and the remedies that come up from that. And we're also going to throw a little third party into the mix. Third party is kind of a misnomer because they're not really a party to the contract. They mean some other person or corporation that benefits from the contract or gets rights under the contract or gets delegated a duty. So we'll look at that. Assignment and delegation, third-party beneficiaries, different remedies are available in case of a breach, and we'll even talk a little bit about election of remedies. So, usually when I say assignment, students say, ugh. But assignment here is good. In fact, in every contract there are rights and duties. Assignment equal right, delegation equal duties. So first thing we'll talk about is when we're talking about a right under the contract and giving that to someone else, that's called an assignment. And as you got up there, you've got A and B in some kind of contract. What was the contract in the book? A and B have a contract for something? Or you got an example? That was like the beginning of the chapter. All right, let's say it's a contract for a laptop or something.
It's Brent.
Yeah. Who's delivering the laptop?
Brent.
Brent? Alex?
Yeah.
Alex A?
Brent owes Alex $1,000.
Okay, so we'll say Alex delivering a laptop, Brent paying $1,000. That sound good? So, in every contract there's rights and duties. Looking at it from Alex's perspective, his duty is to do what? Deliver a laptop. His right is to get what? $1,000. Look at B. Brent has a duty to do what? Pay $1,000 and to get a laptop. That's his right. All right, so looking at it from that perspective, now the question is, what if Carmen, I'm not sure what she's doing, she looks like she's on the phone there. It's kind of like... she needs Bluetooth. So she's on the phone and she's calling Brent and she's saying, yo, I'm just doing this for the recording. I'm trying to make it more relevant. I've just got rights to receive $1,000 assigned to me, and I want you to know because when you go to pay Alex, I don't want you to pay Alex. I want you to pay me, right? So Alex is the what?
Assignee.
Or the assignor. Yes, Alex is the assignor, the one making the assignment. That makes C the assignee, the one the assignment is made to. So Alex, having the right to receive $1,000, assigns it to C, which up there is Carmen. Right? Now, there are other names too. If you look up there, it says Brent is the obligor. He's called the obligor because he's obligated to do what? Pay, right? And that means A is the original obligee, right? Now, if you look down here, and the rights have been assigned to Carmen, and it's kind of hard to see it, but it says she's the new assignee. In the end, B is going to pay her, not Alex. Now, before we get into when you can make assignments and what this really means, if you're C and let's say A owes you $1,000, that's why you're taking the assignment of the money. What do you probably want to have happen before you agree to take an assignment of $1,000 under this contract? That'd be one thing. That's good. I want some evidence, like, why am I getting the $1,000? Couldn't they later say, oh no, I never promised you were going to have the right to receive $1,000? If it were me, I mean, aren't there some potential hiccups in this process? What are they?
The computer doesn't work.
Right. So B gets the computer, and it looks like mine. Mine's all cracked up right now, broken. And so B doesn't want to pay. Right? So C says, where's my money? And B says, not paying. Computer doesn't work. So when would be a good time for C to take an assignment of the $1,000? Only after that's the only thing left, right? I mean, because if it's like, well, I never saw him again. Alex skipped town and didn't deliver the laptop to me or whatever. Right? So an assignment is a transfer of contractual rights under a contract. And on the next slide, we see the effect of that. This party basically steps into the shoes of Alex and gets any rights that Alex has, but he's also Carmen's subject to any defenses. Like, I never got the laptop was broken, or whatever else, yeah.
Why would that be relevant to do? Would it be like Alex owes Carmen money and Alex is...
Right, let's say C goes to Alex, you owe me $1,000. I don't have it, but I'm going to get it. I just got to deliver this laptop, and I'm going to get $1,000 from Brent. And she says, okay, I'm willing to not take $1,000 for you right now with the understanding under this contract I get the money.
Okay.
All right. Now, the law says there's no obligation to notify the obligor that there's been an assignment. But if you're C, what's the first thing you want to do? Let B know, because if you don't, who's B going to pay? A. And what could A do with the money? Right. So you're like, okay, I never got the $1,000 I needed in the first place. All right, now there are certain rights that can't be assigned. Like if there's a law that says you can't assign rights under a contract. Or personal services. Let's say, in this case, it's money, and that's freely assignable to Carmen. But let's say A is supposed to deliver a laptop to B. B is supposed to give A a massage. I know that's the most personal service I could think of. Right? And now C calls up the obligor, B, and says, want my massage. And B says, ew, I don't want to do it. So in the case of personal service contract, that might affect the obligor's duty. If the assignment will materially change the risk or duties of the obligor. You know, A is one party, and let's say C is a whole corporation. You have to massage all our employees. I'm just kind of making it up now, but that could happen. Or when the parties agree that they will not assign their rights under the contract. Usually not if there's the only thing we're talking about is money, but they could agree to do that. Have you ever seen a contract where the parties say, we don't want you delegating your duties to someone else or assigning your rights under a contract? Isn't it like maybe an apartment lease or something a good example of that?
Yes.
Like, we don't want you subleasing or saying someone else is responsible for the rent, you are. Why? Because you dealt with that person, you've checked the credit, you're comfortable with them as a tenant, you don't want someone else in there. All right, delegation. Remember, delegation equal duty. E equal D. So, in the same contract, if there's a duty that needs to be performed, Alex could delegate that duty to Carmen. Alex has to deliver the laptop. He works through Carmen to have it delivered to Brent. What do you guys know about delegation at work? You got something you have to do and you delegate to someone else? You can, right? But who's responsible? You are. Question? Or?
No.
I just answered it. I knew what you were going to ask me and poof. Amazing. Yeah, that doesn't come after 1 year of teaching. There's many years to be able to do that. Yeah, so also if I knew the next transition in the slide, that would help. So the delegatee still owes a duty to the original party in the contract. Is still liable for performance. Like let's say during the summers I'm not earning a lot of money here at school, so I start mowing lawns. I mow a lot of lawns all summer. So then I contract with a bunch of cheap labor to mow the lawns for me, right? Now I have a contract with these different people to mow their lawn all summer, but if they don't get their lawn mowed, who do they come looking for? Me. Or if they do go and mow lawns and they do a bad job, they come looking for me. All right, so generally you can delegate any duty you have under a contract, again, unless some of these conditions exist, which sound a little like what we were saying about assignment. If we agreed not to delegate duty, if the delegation would severely affect the relationship of the parties, if there's some special trust put in the obligor and then we're getting someone else who can't perform it as well. Or this one, when performance depends on personal skills or talents of the original obligor. Anybody in here thinking about getting married anytime soon? Okay, so you're going to get married when?
Next month.
When?
Next month.
Next month. Awesome. Where is your reception going to be? Are you going to have one?
Yeah. Grand Rapids.
In Grand Rapids. Just, keep it general. It's being recorded. We don't want to tell anybody on the recording where it's at. And so now you've let it out to the whole class that you're having a reception. They'll all be heard if you don't invite them. And I will too. So you invite me and the whole class to come to your reception in Grand Rapids. And now, in order to impress us all, you are going to have today's hottest band playing one of the hottest hits. People probably don't even talk like that anymore, but what would that be? To Stumper. Any requests? That's a good idea. Ask what everyone else would like to. What kind of music are you into?
The last song.
See, you're just embarrassed. You do know. You're just embarrassed. You don't want everybody else to know what you like to listen to. Yeah, he likes Lady Gaga. He's pretty good. What's that?
I think he's more of a Justin.
All right. Awesome. You guys didn't get my joke, Lady Gaga. He's pretty good.
Yeah.
All right, so let's see. Justin Bieber singing. Lady Gaga singing.
Paparazzi.
Paparazzi. Well, can you give me some clean words to that song?
Paparazzi.
That's a word in it. You don't really care. It just says paparazzi over and over. Does it sound like this? Paparazzi. Does it sound like that? No. So we all show up at your wedding. You've contracted with Lady Gaga to come out and sing that, but instead I come out dressed like Lady Gaga.
Wow. Dress and everything?
Yes, and sang that. Now, what do you think? Yeah, you're mad. You are mad because you entered into a personal service or talent contract, and that's probably the best artist I can think about, right? Because maybe he or she isn't the best singer, but has a unique personality, and you can't get that anywhere else, right? So you would be disappointed. Even, let's say I came out and I sang the song better than Lady Gaga. Still, I'm not, right? You haven't seen me in a dress and you don't want to. All right. So here's kind of a summary of all we've been talking about in terms of assignment and delegation. Right down at the bottom, it talks about the effect on the original party. If it's a valid assignment, it's the contract permits it, the law permits it, etc., then the original party no longer has the right to get it. So in our example, Alex does not have a right to receive that $1,000 anymore. Carmen does. And then over here on the right, on a valid delegation, if the delegatee fails to perform, the original delegator is liable to the obligee. Now, in the case where I subcontract out my work to people to go around and mow lawns for me, I can certainly go after them, but I can't use it as an excuse to get out of my obligations under the contracts that I entered into. All right, third-party beneficiaries. Sometimes parties contract to not only benefit themselves, but somebody else who is not a party to the contract. Like, I hope my kids never listen to this, but right now I have violin lessons, piano lessons, and something called a recorder or something, right, going. And believe me, I'm not benefiting a lot from it right now. I'm sure someday it will be music to my ears, but anyway, I'm the one that's contracting. You know, it's not a contract between my minor children and the teacher. It's between me and the teacher. But the reason we're contracting together, because the instructor gets paid, I get some benefit somehow, but the party who's primarily benefited from it is who's ever getting the lessons. Think about that here. Think about how the college hired me and contracts with me each semester to teach. You guys might question, especially after my singing, whether you're getting any benefit from that or not. But that's the idea. I have a contract with a college. You're not mentioned in it anywhere. Right? I mean, they're hiring me, they're paying me, and I'm teaching. But nowhere does it say that when they hired me, they intend to benefit you or you or you or any of you. It just is a blanket for the benefit of students. Okay? Now, other times, we know the party is intended to benefit on the left over there because they're listed as the intended beneficiary in the contract. What's a good example of that? Have you ever seen a contract where in the contract it says beneficiary? No, will's not a contract. Insurance, right? So that's pretty common. Health insurance, life insurance. So I have a insurance policy on my wife, and in it lists my wife, my spouse, and then my family as the beneficiary. I'm not going to benefit. Right? When I die, it's not coming to me, it's going to my family.
That's the intended.
Right, they're intended, and we know that they are intended because it's listed right in the contract. And it's kind of logical that I'm not going to benefit from it. Because the only time a party is vested is when I die. And if you think about it, what would it be like if my wife goes to the insurance company and says, I want the death benefit, and they say, we don't have a contract with you. I mean, she needs to be able to step in and enforce her rights under the contract, even though she's not a party to the contract. Now, before I die, I could change the beneficiary. Right? After I die, it's harder for me to do that. All right, incidental beneficiary. An incidental beneficiary is an accidental, unintended beneficiary. They get a benefit from a contract even though the parties who did the contract didn't intend them to benefit. Did you follow that? So let's say...
Be like your kids with the lessons.
well, yeah, whether I would benefit?
Intended to benefit, right?
Right, they are an intentional beneficiary, right? So even though they're not a party to the contract, they are entitled to lessons.
Right.
Like it wouldn't be like the teacher going, who are you? Like, well, I'm supposed to get lessons. I didn't contract with you. So, I mean, they have a right. Let's say GRCC contracts to have a parking garage built. Who's supposed to benefit from that? Maybe. Right? So staff, students, maybe people who rent space, I don't know. But that's who's intended to benefit. Now let's say there's a coffee shop next door. And ever since they built a parking garage, sales at the coffee shop have went up a whole lot. Maybe because the entrance to the parking garage is pointed right at the coffee shop. Do they benefit from the contract? Yes, but it's only an incidental benefit. And so the key difference is right down here at the bottom. They can't do anything about the contract. They can't sue and complain when the parking garage isn't open, if it's built bad, or anything like that. They're just getting an incidental benefit. Versus my wife, as a beneficiary in my life insurance contract, could step in and sue if the life insurance company didn't pay. So the reason we want to know whether a party was intended to benefit is to what rights they have to enforce the contract in court. And that's pretty much what this says. Vesting occurs when a third party demonstrates they consent to be a beneficiary, like to receive insurance benefits, and as a result, whenever the condition is satisfied, and in the case I mentioned, my death, then somebody would be entitled to sue for breach if they didn't perform. No, that says the same thing. All right, contract discharge. As you look up there, I will tell you that one of the ways a contract can be discharged is by performance. In fact, most contracts are discharged when the parties do what they're supposed to. What's another word we've used for that when all parties have done everything they're supposed to? Versus one party who hasn't done at least one thing. Executed, yes. So, a contract that's completed, is done, is discharged. So we'll talk about the difference between complete and substantial performance. Then the next one down, breach. We'll talk about the difference between a material and minor breach. And then one of my favorite concepts to say, anticipatory repudiation. Just rolls off the tongue. And then cases where even though the parties don't agree, the law steps in and discharges the contract. And we'll talk about conditions as another way. And then finally, the parties actually agree to discharge the contract. So how many different ways of discharging a contract do you see? At least 5, right? Okay. So if you didn't write all that down, that's okay. We're going to go through each one of them. The contract is discharged when all the parties have done everything they're supposed to. Sometimes, though, there's a condition. In fact, where does it talk about conditions of performance in your chapter there? Is it 275? Does that sound about right? I don't have my book with me, but I kind of have it memorized. Okay. So on page 275, there should be a couple examples. Yeah, so if you haven't read it already, take a moment and read those 2 examples there. Then I have a pop quiz for you. Ungraded. So what's the condition in the first example? There's not. That's why you're my favorite class. Because no one else can figure that out. It says there's unconditional, right? So they put an example under conditions and it's not an example of a condition. But it's basically to show you this is the way contracts can work without a condition. The risk is on the parties that the painting's going to be worth what they're paying. So one way you could use a condition is to only have an obligation to perform if it appraises at a certain amount, right? That's the condition in the second example. If it appraises at what, $10,000 or more, then they go forward. If it doesn't, then what? What's it called if the condition isn't met? Discharge, right? So another way to discharge a contract is when some condition occurs. Now, I don't care about precedent, subsequent, and concurrent right now. That has to do with the timing. And you can kind of see this as an example of that, right? Before the parties go on in the contract, there's something that occurs or doesn't occur that leads to the contract going forward or not. You could also have a contract that's ongoing, but the parties have agreed to some kind of condition that if it happens, they're done. If you don't produce a certain amount or you don't do this or that, then I'm out. All right, so how many different ways have we talked about discharging a contract so far? 2, performance and conditions. Now this slide gets in more detail about performance. Another word for complete performance is what? Good. Yeah, that's what it says right there on the slide. That's why you guys are my perfect class. Okay. So, how many things in life are perfect? I know of one at least, but outside of that, I don't really know that many. And no, I wasn't talking about me. So, yeah, it's just really hard to be perfect. My dad can tell you about that. But as an example of that, how about if everybody stands up? You can't really see this on the video, but everybody is standing up, jumping around right now. Go ahead, stand up. All right, one. Okay, one. Oh, one. All right, now, while you're standing up, you know, my other classes, they stand up. They're not my favorite class unless you stand up. Now, look across the top of the blue border all the way around, especially in the back, especially in that corner over there. All right, look at the paint job above the blue line. All right, have a seat. Just wanted you guys to stretch a little bit and to see if I can make you all stand up. So now, what do you notice? Because you probably could notice it even sitting down, but it's bad, right? I mean, if you look at it closely, it's like somebody put some tape on there and then yanked it off and didn't paint.
Did you see the one right above you?
Oh, don't tell me, because like I'm supposed to be teaching, I'm staring at it, and I'm going like, that's really messed up. Like right in that corner over there, that one bugs me. I don't like to look at it. Right behind you, in this corner, right over here, up there. Look how bad that is. The whole thing is missing. No, not that. Up above. You can't see that? It's horrible. Yeah, you're at a bad angle.
Okay.
So just sit down. Don't worry about it. Don't let it bug you. Yeah, so you're looking up here, and I think you're paying attention to me, but you're just staring at that bad paint job. All right, so it's not perfect, right? So the question is, I hire somebody to come in and paint this room, and this is what they do. It's not going to be perfect. Even if they tried to make it perfect, even if they got all that, maybe I can look underneath the chalkboard, or not chalkboard, what's this called? Whiteboard? Yes, because it's white and doesn't take chalk. Underneath the whiteboard, and I find a little speck. I'm like, I'm not paying, look at that, you missed a spot, right? Not perfect. Well, the law says it doesn't have to be. The law says as long as the other party has substantially performed, another word for substantial performance is good enough performance, then you got to pay, or you have to perform whatever it is you have to do. So that's why we care. The reason we end up court and debating over whether this is substantial performance or not is because if it is substantial performance, you got to pay something. If it's not, then the other parties materially breach the contract and you don't. What happens if you just walk in the room and go, I'm not paying? Well, then that's a breach, right? So you need to pay a lot of attention to whether something is substantial performance. Now, some of you might say, well, it seems kind of subjective. Well, in the end, it is, right? You go to court, and the court determines whether, based on the evidence, it's enough. Like, what if I say I want this room painted, and I come in and 3 out of 4 walls are painted? I would say that's not substantial performance. I mean, it's the majority of the walls, but still, it's just not good enough. Right, I wanted the whole room done. And I think it might even matter what the application is. If somebody did this in my house, I would not be happy, right?
Would you pay him?
I would probably ask them to cure, which means to fix the breach.
And if this is the fixed version.
Oh, yeah, this is the best they did?
Yeah.
I might try to work it out short of suing them somehow. I mean, because I realize that the expense and time and effort it would take to sue somebody over this
What I'm saying
may not be worth
if
it.
they did it, how do you determine what?
Well, that's the issue is you don't. The court does. So the only way you're going to get an ultimate determination of that is to go to court, and it's usually good to avoid that if all possible. Certainly, in this kind of situation, might I be up there fixing it myself before taking the effort, time, and money to get, or would I hire someone else to come in and fix it? Maybe. I mean, I think those are the realities. Court might determine later that it's a substantial performance or it's not. All right, so if it's substantial performance, in fact, I'll write that up here. Substantial equal minor breach. This usually gets students on the final exam. Substantial performance is a minor breach. It is a breach because it's not perfect. But since it's only a minor breach, that means the other party is obligated to continue to perform. If it's not substantial, if it's not good enough, then what kind of breach is it? Major or material breach? A material breach means the other party who's paying could suspend their performance. So in the case of, right, in the case of 3 out of 4 walls, I'd come in and say, yeah, I really feel uncomfortable giving you all the money for the job that you haven't all the way done. Now there is a little bit of an exception in that usually it's objective from the court's perspective as to whether performance is substantial or not. I could enter into a special kind of contract where I asked for the other party to perform to my satisfaction. But even then, the courts say that satisfaction can't be unreasonable. So if I'm just looking for a minor little thing underneath the whiteboard here to try to prevent paying somebody, that's unreasonable. When we built our house, my wife and I had this thing about the ceilings. She was okay with them just spackling or texturing it or something because that covers up a lot. I wanted flat white ceilings. And the painter said, it's going to cost you more money, and if you lay on the couch and look at it long enough, you're going to start seeing all the imperfections in the ceiling. That's true, and I can be picky sometimes, so I could lay there and look at it and go, oh, missed that, oh, that's not right. But the court would say, even if I said it was to my satisfaction, that I couldn't use that to unreasonably avoid paying for it. Yeah.
So how does the average person determine what's reasonable?
The average person doesn't. The court does.
You don't want to go to court for everything.
That's true. That's true. I mean, that's the underlying thing here is if it's something like this, what other alternatives are there besides going to court and having a court determine whether something's substantial or not? Right.
And then, most of the time they're going to say, don't bring me to court, I'll go fix it.
Right. I mean, sometimes it's just a question of I thought I was done, you don't think I am, and you seem kind of unreasonable about it, but I want you to be happy, and here you go. Other times it might be you're being unreasonable, I've been back 3 times, I'm not doing it again, and I'm done. Mm-hmm. I guess it depends on the type of contract. Like I think there's a difference between a photography session and shipping a refrigerator, right? I mean, you ship a refrigerator, is it the make model that you asked for? Is it free from defects? Photography, I think, is probably a little more subjective. All right. If it's a material breach of the contract, then performance is not substantial, then the other party, the innocent party, could excuse their own performance. If it is substantial performance, it's only a minor breach, and if it's a minor breach, then the remedy is to get it fixed, get it cured. Anticipatory repudiation is a little different. You guys know what it means to anticipate, right? Repudiation really means breach. Why don't they call it breach? Because it's not yet. So you have anticipatory repudiation when you think the other party is gonna breach the contract. They still got time, but it's not looking good. My best example is from personal experience. I have taken my family to Disney World with each new kid, so I've been there a few times. And one time when I was going down there during spring break, I was telling my students about this concept, and I put up a webcam of the resort that we were staying in, except that there was no resort there. And, there's some earth movers and stuff. And so I called down there. I'm like, according to your website, you're not there. And I got, yep, you got us. Sorry about that. We tore down the resort. We're rebuilding it. Like, well, I have reservations. Weren't you going to let me know that you didn't have a room for me? Oh, yeah, our bad. We'll put you up someplace nice. We'll put you someplace nice. So, if you think the other party's going to breach, the moral of the story is to do what? Deal with it now. Ask them, are you going to be able to perform or not? Because if you're not, then I want to go find another place to stay or get the product from somewhere else, whatever I need to do. Now, if you contact them and they say, oh, no, we'll be ready for you, then you got to wait. Now, if you wait and that causes you more damage, then you could get that. But if they say to you, yep, you got us, then you could treat that as the breach even though the time for performance hasn't come. I mean, would it make much sense for me to fly my family down there, show up in the field with my suitcases and go, where's our room? No, right? So ask immediately whether they will be breaching the contract or not. You're driving by the factory. It appears to be closed down now. They're going into bankruptcy, whatever it is. All right, discharge by agreement. So it's not a condition, it's not performance, but the parties agree to the discharge. And there's different ways this might happen. One is, hey, you're not happy, I'm not happy, let's both back out. That's called mutual rescission up there. Now, if you're taking notes, I'm going to add a little extra to what the slide says. Notice it says, parties must make another agreement. The only agreement they're making is not to have an agreement. You ever told somebody that? Let's just agree to disagree. That's this. Hey, let's reach an agreement that we already have an agreement, but we don't have an agreement anymore. All right, novation is a little different. Rather than the parties backing out of the agreement, let's say, for example, it's a contract to build a house. A and B have a contract. A is the builder. And for some reason, A can't perform. Why can't A build the house anymore?
Loss of license.
Right. Alex here is no longer licensed to build homes, but knows of Carmen, who is. So he goes to B and he's, I can't do it, but I know someone that can. The first option up there is, let's just undo our contract because I can't perform it anymore, right? But instead, hey, I've got someone else who can. Novation is when the old contract goes away and a new contract is in its place that includes an old party and a new party. Another word for this is substitution. But notice the difference. It's not putting this party into this old contract. It's a new contract. And this contract is what? Discharge. Right? This contract is discharged because of novation, because there's a new contract in its place, which has an old party and a new party in it. Now, the last one is called an accord and satisfaction. Let's say you owe $10,000 on your credit card, and you can't pay it. And you send the credit card company $5,000. What are they going to do? Say thank you and say you owe $5,000, still on it. What if instead of sending them the $5,000, you call them and you say, I only have 5,000. Soon I'm not going to have this. Would you be willing to take 5,000 when I owe you 10? Now, why would they do that? Right, they know they're not going to get anything out of you, or it's going to cost them a lot of money to get it out of you. So they agree to take less than they originally agreed to. So when the parties to a contract agree to take something different than what they originally promised, that's called an accord and satisfaction. The accord is, will you take 5? The satisfaction is, yes, I will take 5. That was my best satisfied sound. Yes. And the effect is, the contract is discharged in the example for less than what it originally was to be discharged for. So there's not a practical exercise question on the difference between these three, but there is likely a final exam question on knowing the difference between these. So if you're given a scenario, you'd be able to look at the scenario and say, oh, this is what the parties are doing. This is a discharge by agreement under one of these three.
So you said the accord was the new agreement to take the lesser amount and the satisfaction was giving them.
Yeah. So there's not, in the end, there's only going to be a discharge contract. There's not going to be a new contract in its place. All right, so let's say the parties don't agree to discharge the contract, but the law does it for them. There's different ways this could happen. The law could say one of the parties materially altered the contract without the other party's knowledge, so we're going to make the contract go away. That's why if you ever contracted for a new car purchase or something like that, and the other party changes the terms, what do they usually have you do? Initial, sign something, or they modify it and have you both agree to it, because they don't want to be accused later of modifying the agreement without your consent. Statute of limitations. A statute that says if you wait too long to sue for a breach of contract, you can't anymore. Depends on the type of contract, depends on the state. Let's say one day you get a call from XYZ Credit. You're like, who are you? Well, we used to be ABC. Oh, now I remember. You owe us $10,000. I don't have it. Well, I'll tell you what. You haven't been real good at paying. We obviously haven't been real good at collecting. How about you give us $5,000? We'll call it good. Now, on the surface, what does that sound like? Taking $5,000 when you owe $10,000. Sounds like what we were just talking about, accord and satisfaction. But what might it be? Could be fraud. It could be like somebody just calling you out of the blue and asking to pay them.
Payment, now they have you and you have
That's right.
They're making the statute of limitations.
Right. So they're not being fully truthful in the fact that if you said no and they tried to go after you, you could use the statute of limitations as a defense. Look, you waited too long. You can't collect anything out of me. So what they're trying to get you to do is enter into a new agreement, which then starts that day forward. So, bankruptcy. Bankruptcy, in effect, discharges contracts. Credit card, whatever it is, it may step in and discharge that contract. Impossibility. Sometimes, must be on the next slide, there's an arrow there. It's objectively impossible to perform a contract. If I die, it's harder for me to do things under a contract. If I'm contracting to sell a house and the house burns down, it's hard to sell the house. It's not there anymore. Or perhaps the law changes in such a way as to what used to be permissible or legal is now illegal and can't be performed. Some situations, it might be a temporary thing. It might be just take the parties waiting for performance and then being able to perform. Now, there's a couple concepts which are close, and they're to try to address situations where it's not impossible to perform, but just really, really hard for some reason. And it's got to get to a level where the court says, in the case of a commercial impracticality, it's so expensive to perform, and it wasn't foreseeable. So think about those two things. There was a company that contracted, a farm that contracted to provide milk to a school district. And when it came time to deliver the milk, the school district had a set price for it to be delivered at. And the farm said, can't deliver at that price. It cost us much more to deliver it than you're getting it for. So they went to court and they asked the court to set it aside, not because it was impossible to deliver the milk because they had it, but that it was commercially impractical because it was way more expensive to deliver the milk than what the school district had contracted for. The court said, no. Certainly is extremely expensive to meet the terms of this contract, but it was also foreseeable that this could happen. So now, if you think the price of something might fluctuate between the time you enter into the contract and when you actually have to deliver, what could you agree to in the contract?
Subject to.
Right. Whatever the market is or whatever else. And the court said, you should have done that. But instead, the school district was smart and contracted when the price is low to get it at a low price and locked it in. And you assumed the risk that it wasn't going to go up much. So it has to be extremely expensive, 3 times the value, whatever, and not foreseeable to the other party. Frustration of purpose. Something comes into play that makes it not that it's impossible to do it, but it's completely different than what the parties contemplated doing in the first place. There's this case where these two parties contracted to maintain a rail system. And then after they contracted to maintain the rail system, some series of events happened that caused basically the rail system to have to be rebuilt. And one party said, all right, you're supposed to maintain it, make it so that we can do what we need to do. And the other party said, no. This series of events, natural disaster, whatever, has frustrated the purpose of our contract. We would need to do more than maintain it. We would have to rebuild it. And that is not what we intended at the beginning of this contract. All right, damages. This is the second question on the practical exercise. It's about the different types of damages. I know some of you looked at it multiple times, so you remember that. I need another contract. Somebody give me a contract for something.
Buy a stereo.
Stereo? How many?
Buy a stereo.
Buy a stereo. Let's say 100 stereos. And how much do they cost a piece? $600. That's all.
I was thinking the same thing.
Well, a high-end receiver. I mean, that's not bad.
It's cheap.
That's not bad.
Well, I was getting
So what is that? 60000? Is that right? So $60,000 in audio equipment, high end, and A has to deliver it to B by when?
November 1st.
November 1. Now A calls B today and says, "I'm not going to be able to deliver this audio equipment for $60,000 on November 1st." Given that there's still time, what could B do? Well, I don't know if they're going to renegotiate because the other party's saying we're not going to get them to you. Right? They could. They could say, forget it. Let's say they need it for something else, though. They need it. What could they do?
I can afford it.
I suppose But still, they need them by
Just go to
November
another-
1.
Just go to another
Yes. Yes, unless these are unique, only provided by this one reseller. They can go somewhere else and get them. But now they go somewhere else and get them. And they end up spending 70 grand for them. Compensatory damages are what they're actually out. Not the 70 grand, but what?
buyer.
10 grand. So because they had to go somewhere else to get them, they're out to 10 grand plus maybe some other expenses related to doing that. That's their actual or compensatory damages.
And that's what they can sue the company for?
Well, they can sue for almost anything. Now we're talking about what they're actually going to get.
Yeah.
So this is one thing they're actually going to get. Because as a result of their breach, they had to go somewhere else to get them. And it cost them more to get them somewhere. So they're losing the benefit of their bargain, and they got to pay more for them. Now, let's say the reason that they needed these 100 systems at $600 a piece is because they were going to install them, I don't know, where?
At school.
In a school? Really? Okay, so they have a contract all over the country at 100 schools to install on November 1st $600 receiver. Okay. Consequential damages are the indirect foreseeable risk or loss that they would suffer. So not this amount from not getting the receivers, but in this other contract, they lose, let's say $10,000, just because I'm picking a number out of the blue. They're going to lose $10,000 by not getting these installed on November 1st in these schools. The consequential question is, can they recover from the stereo company for this $10,000 as a result of not getting the stereos on November 1st? The law says, no, not unless it's foreseeable to the other party that they were going to incur this loss over here.
Say that again?
So they're not going to get these consequential losses unless they can establish that it was foreseeable to A that they were going to have these losses. Now, generally, do you remember the RV? The RV and the guy who went out and built the shed or building or structure outside of his house? You're selling RVs, you're not going to know what people are going to use it for. You're selling stereos in bulk, you don't necessarily know someone has a deadline or a contract to have them installed somewhere and is going to lose $10,000. How could you make it foreseeable?
So in the contract.
All right, you put good. That's why you guys are my favorite class. So you put it in the contract that if you don't deliver them on this date, we not only suffer the loss it will take us to get them somewhere else, but we're out this. And even get them to agree to pay it. Now, they might not, but that's how you'd make it foreseeable. Now, I think the more related to this you can be, the more chance that it might be foreseeable. But generally, the only way you're going to get consequential damages is if it was foreseeable to the other party that you were going to suffer this other loss. All right. Punitive. Punitive damages are above and beyond actual and consequential damages. They're rare. You're not going to just see it in a regular breach of contract action. Usually this is the case when some kind of tort occurs also. Anybody remember the Ford Pinto? It had a bad habit. It liked to blow up if you hit it. So in the trial, the court determined that Ford knew about and could have fixed the problem, but instead chose not to and wait until they got sued and to see if anybody was successful in actually recovering. And so the court gave the estates actual damages, consequential damages, pain and suffering, and then said on top of that, because Ford doesn't feel this yet, multi-million dollars in punitive damages. So they'll feel the effect, and then in the future they'll choose not to do things that way. But outside of situations like that, it's not like, oh, naughty, naughty, you knew I needed those stereos and you didn't get them, you should be punished. It's not like that. That's not what we're talking about. Now, if they intentionally, repeatedly did something, then maybe the court might go further. But that should help you on number 2 also. All right, nominal damages are like $1. Like, technically, you're right, there was a breach, but you haven't shown any actual damages, so we're going to give you $1 so we can show who won. Do you want to go to court and go through all that to get $1? No, you don't want nominal damages. It's a way of saying you won, but not really. And the nominal damages is nominal, like $1, like nothing. Technically you won, but you didn't really recover any actual damages. No, just could be a penny. I don't know. Could be $2. Could be $1.50. It's basically, as it says up there, it's no real proof of actual monetary loss, so we're just going to say you won.
You said for the punitive damages, it wouldn't work like for the stereo example unless they had like repeatedly like 10 or 12 different times like that.
Right. Or perhaps they could show some kind of fraudulent scheme, like they never had them and they knew about what they were going to use them for and they tricked them, or, you know, that would be tortious. But outside of that, probably not. All right, and this kind of goes through actual damages and consequential damages, which we've talked about the difference between the contract price and the market price, what it costs to get it somewhere else. We've mentioned the sale of land before, remember? Battery's getting a little low. Guess I better finish. Sale of land, that when we want to get the benefit of the bargain, then we want the land, right? We don't really want the contract price. But if we can't get it for some reason, like someone else has it, then we might get, you know, the benefit of that in terms of dollars, difference between the fair market value and what we contracted it for. And then don't worry so much about construction contracts. I'm not going to give you an example of a construction contract, but this kind of shows you how you can see, depending on what phase you are in construction, the amount of damages you're actually going to be out. I mean, from no one has really commenced work yet or put a lot out there to, you know, in the end, all costs incurred by the owner to complete it, you know, from the owner's perspective. All right, we mentioned consequential and punitive damages already. We mentioned nominal. Technically, it's an injury, no actual damages. Mitigation. So, mitigation is the non-breaching party's obligation to reduce their own damages. Like, rather than just let it pile up, like say you're renting someplace out, somebody leaves, breaches the lease, what should you probably try to do? Find someone to put in there. I mean, don't just sit there intentionally and leave it empty so you can accumulate damages. All right, then liquidated versus penalty. Liquidated damages are the only type of damages you agree to before the breach. Like you actually put in the contract, instead of waiting till actually the breach and suing for some amount, you agree in the contract to what you're entitled to if there is a breach. Anybody ever a cell phone contract that has a provision in it that if you breach the contract you're going to have to pay a set dollar amount? That's a good example. Now, if the company says you have to pay 3 times the value of the entire contract, courts aren't real happy about enforcing those kind of provisions. They consider that an excessive, illegal penalty. So liquidated, you can usually, the court will enforce if it's a reasonable estimate of the actual amount of damages and it's agreed to in advance. We've already talked about all that. All right, equitable remedies. Whoops, didn't want me to go that fast. Back. Rescission. Rescission means to undo, to cancel. So the court waves its magic equitable wand and undoes the contract. Restitution. Remember the RV example? If the person made a down payment, they ought to get the down payment back. So recapturing benefit that's conferred on the other party. Sometimes it's money. Sometimes it's something, property that's been exchanged and not paid for. So rescission to undo, restitution to get back. Specific performance we've talked a lot about before. Usually it's when a legal remedy is inadequate. Damages aren't going to do it. It's unique. Here's one new thing. There's a difference between a contract for a piece of art that's unique and you can get specific performance and a contract to make art. What is it called when the court forces somebody to perform labor? No. Slavery. When you make somebody perform labor. I mean, we understand that if we want to quit a job, we can. No one can physically make us do the job unless we're imprisoned. Then sometimes they make you do stuff on the side of the highway. But, short of that, that's the difference here is if it's a contract to do something, like the one example is brain surgery. What would it be like if you compelled your brain surgeon to do brain surgery on you? It might not turn out so good. Yeah?
I was just thinking about the prisoners on the side of the highway. Like, even then, they probably still have a choice. Like, you can go into solitary or you...
I suppose, yeah. I mean, like to physically make them might be considered cruel and unusual. Good point.
But they're going to be reprimanded.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there may be really bad consequences.
Right,
They
but
don't.
I mean, even...
All right, reformation. Reformation is not about undoing the contract, but reforming it or making it reflect what the parties originally agreed to. Quasi-contract we already talked about, right? Remember, this is the type of remedy you get when there isn't an actual contract. Remember that fictional contract the court whips up afterwards? And then finally, the last concept in the chapter, election of remedies. You can't get more than being made whole. Remember the RV example. You can't get the RV and the money for the RV. You can't get specific performance and the entire amount.